Thank you. I call the member for Ryde.
Thank you, Speaker. I've spoken in this chamber several times about the vibrancy of my local multicultural community, and in particular I've spoken about the wonderful projects and initiatives that have been rolled out over the years, including by the City of Ryde Council, by the former government, and indeed I hope by the current government to support the very fast-growing eastern side, or as colloquially known, the Korean side of Eastwood. And before the election, a lot of work was done to support and work with this community, and I wanted to draw to the attention of the House a particular commitment that was made by the now government in relation to a cultural centre for the eastern side of Eastwood, an important project which finds its origins back in 2018 when the then Labor Deputy Mayor of Ryde, former Councillor Peter Kim, moved a resolution to facilitate the passage and planning of a cultural centre above what is now the Eastwood East car park. This was a really important project, something that was supported by the council at the time and enjoyed widespread community support. At that time, there was some reluctance amongst the council, and particularly the bean counters at council, in relation to the expense and cost of that particular add-on to the project. And as a consequence, what eventuated was that a car park was built, which was highly in need, but a cultural centre above it was not. However, a decision was made to retrofit the project to build the project such that a cultural centre could be retrofitted if at a future date in time the council found itself with the funds to build such a centre. This has always been the plan and would have been a great project for our community. So this leads me to the pre-election commitment that was made by the government in relation to building this cultural centre. It was announced roughly 7 days prior to the election to the Korean community at a debate or candidates forum and was received rather positively. It was something that myself as the then candidate and the council were also happy to support because, as I stated at the beginning of this address, there was widespread support for a cultural centre in Eastwood, and it was warmly welcomed by the Korean community. However, as the time has moved along, and the details of this project have emerged, it's now become quite clear that the promise was nothing more than a shallow attempt days before an election to try and win over a cultural group in my electorate of Ryde. I find this highly offensive because our Korean community, like all of our cultural groups, are not one big homogenous group able to be bought with a project and the flashing of money. In fact, had the government, then opposition, taken the time to consult with the council and with the community, they would realise that the $400,000 that they dangled in front of the community just before the election was not even remotely in the ballpark to ensure that this project was built. We're talking about several millions of dollars worth of cultural centre, something that fell well short of that funding commitment. My concern is that the promise was made to build the cultural centre. The promise wasn't about giving $400,000, it was to build a cultural centre. It was a very strong implication, and it was written down and repeated multiple times by councillors and after the election by representatives of the Premier's office. So therefore the expectation has been set that the Korean community in Ryde would be the recipient of a cultural centre built by the government. And now what has been revealed is that there is insufficient funding in what has been allocated to actually achieve this outcome. It is a rank broken promise. It was an attempt to win a cohort of voters before an election, and I'm extremely disappointed that more homework wasn't done prior to this announcement to ensure that my community in Ryde, and specifically in Eastwood, could get the cultural facilities that it requires. Speaking of the Korean community, we know that there is an expired or expiring lease that is currently home to the Korean Society of Sydney. They would make perfect use of a facility like this in Eastwood, and yet the reality is that that's not going to happen because insufficient funding and insufficient commitment has been made to ensure that the project promised before the election will actually be delivered after the election. I am very pleased by the response that I've had working in partnership with the now Deputy Mayor of Ryde, Councillor Daniel Hahn, on a petition which has received hundreds of almost exclusively Korean community participants, and we're working closely with them to continue to advocate and fight to ensure that the cultural centre that was promised to the Korean community in Eastwood is built and is fully funded by this government, as was promised before the election. It's over to the government now to deliver on their commitments.